Good morning, Year 11. Welcome to Friday's lesson. Please could you write down the date and title and underline them in your homework books. Thank you. So today, as the title tells you, we are continuing with question 3. Question 3, to remind you, is virtually identical to question 2 on language paper 1, where you're given a small extract and you've got to analyse the language used. In this case though, you will look at the source and you will identify the line numbers you're asked to look at, and that's where you'll do your language analysis. So by the end of the lesson today, you will analyse how writers make language choices to achieve effects, and you will annotate an extract with what is needed to answer paper 2, question 3. So you do not need to copy this table down. This is a reminder for you of some of the devices you will be seeing in these lessons. It's useful to have it here for you to return to if you don't remember what a metaphor, simile, or allusion is. So it's here for you if you do not remember those devices when we meet them later in this lesson. We did this last lesson. You do not need to write down the example, but I've kept it here because you will need to remind yourself of what a semantic field is later in the lesson today. Please do not do this activity. So let's remind you, question 3, steps to success. We annotate, we plan, we write our answer, we check our answer. In today's lesson, we're going to read about a storm. There's some vocabulary for you here that I thought you may not be overly familiar with. If you do not know what these words mean, you need to pause the video now and write them in your homework book, please, so you can refer to them in the lesson when you see them in the extract. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Here is our paragraph for today. Now I want to keep reminding you, in the actual exam, you will have the entire source and you'll be given line numbers to find this paragraph in. For ease, I have provided it for you here on the PowerPoint slide. You are going to independently read this question and extract carefully and think about how the storm has been described. You will then, I realise you do not have this physically in front of you printed out, but you can still make some notes in your book. Writing in your book, please, the quotations you would select and what you could say about them. So once you've read it, try to select 2 to 4, so 2 to 4 quotations, and do little brainstorms or bullet points beneath them about what the language reveals about the storm. Please give yourself 15 minutes to do this, and then we'll compare your ideas with mine. Please pause the video now. Thank you. Right, let's see if your ideas are similar to mine. So the first time I read this, the first thing I spotted was this pattern running through it, with this vocabulary: whipped, ripping, in its grip, and struck. Can you identify what this technique is? It's on the table that we looked at a moment ago that I asked you not to write down, but to refer to if you needed it. Hopefully you were all able to identify this is a semantic field of violence. Please, in your book, write down this subheading, choosing language devices to analyse, and number 1, semantic field of violence, whipped, ripping, in its grip, struck. Please pause the video to do this now. Okay, we're moving on. The second thing I spotted, which is right in the middle, was this. Can you please take a second, if you haven't already identified it, to consider what technique is being used here? The technique used is biblical allusion, which in plain English means a reference to religious texts. Now we have a very long quotation here. If you want to get to the highest marks, you have to judiciously select quotes, which means don't just write down entire long lengths, select out the key details from this quote. So I've selected the keywords Shiva and Nemesis. These are the gods that are being referred to. I don't need to explain to the examiner that they're the goddess of retribution and destruction, because it's already told me that in the passage. I picked out the judicious, most important part of the quote. Please copy this down. Pause your video because I'm going to move on. Next one. Can you identify what this technique is? A swirling mantle of hurricane force winds. A mantle, if you remember, is a cloak. It's a metaphor because it's comparing directly the hurricane to a cloak. Please write this down. If you're not ready, pause your video because I'm going to move on. And the last one, where is it? Oh, I've given it to you, I forgot to underline it. Struck. If the storm had struck in winter. This is personification. To strike someone means to hit them. So with the storm being personified. Please write down this last one. So for this question, which is 12 marks, you only need to find 4 quotations and 4 techniques or keywords to analyse. Here are our 4 we're going to focus on in this lesson. Now today, I've decided I'm going to put myself on the spot, challenge myself, and do some live modelling for you. I'm not going to use a visualiser, I'm just going to minimise this PowerPoint and type because I think that would be the easiest thing for you to be able to read on your various screens. So, here's our lesson for today. I've got my ideas written down. I know I have a semantic field of violence and I have my quotations, but now I've actually got to say what the effect is. So you're going to copy this down with me, or use your own ideas as I'm typing, because you may feel inspired by seeing something that I have written. As I type, I'm going to talk aloud what's running through my mind. So the first thing I'm thinking is, why has the writer used whipped, ripping, in its grip, and struck? Of all the words they could have used, why these violent terms? And as I'm looking at these, I remember I need to have a judicious selection of quotes. So I'm going to remove struck from this semantic field, because I already have 3 good quotes to use, and I want to use struck later on to say this personification. So, whipped, ripping, and in its grip. To my mind, this implies that the storm is ferocious, like a wild, uncaged animal. And untamable. Oh, it appears I can't spell that. Please write this down with me. You're always welcome to pause, to write down and press play again. So I'm trying to think of 3 ideas for each quote. So far we've got it's ferocious, like a wild, uncaged, untamable animal. My next idea is it seems to delight, so enjoy in causing harm, almost sadistically. If you're a sadist, you enjoy hurting people by whipping them. Whipping is also a medieval punishment intended to deliberately cause pain and harm. So really supporting my idea that this storm is sadistic. Oh, there should not be an apostrophe there. That's bad. Get out. Naughty apostrophe. That should not be there. So in its grip. So I've just referred back to my semantic field word, violence, to end my paragraph here. And that's my 3rd idea. Please pause the video if you need to now to copy this down. I'm going to move on to biblical allusion. I'm going to delete the title so I can move this up and give myself some more space to write. So comparing the storm to a vengeful, seeking for revenge, destructive, wanting to cause harm, God, shows how powerful it is compared to the humans. It can take and destroy life like a god. Indestructible means that you cannot damage it. Immortal means it will live forever. Why doesn't it look like that? There we go, never ending. Now I'm racking my brain to think of a third idea for a biblical illusion. If I really can't think of anything though, I'm just going to move on. I've said to you before, don't sit for ages trying to think of something when you might have better ideas for other quotations. Yep, I'm happy with how much I've said for biblical illusion. It's more than 1 point. I would now move on. If you need to stay on this page, please pause your video to keep writing. If you have your own ideas to add, please add them in. I've given you an example of some of my ideas that arose when I saw these words. I'm going to open a new slide now and put the last 2 quotations on there to explore. Pause the video if you need to stay where we are. So when I think of a mantle is a cloak. It wraps around you, but it can also be a bit suffocating. Those are my 2 ideas. I'm just going to do 2 ideas for personification and then leave it there. So the word struck is what I'm looking at now. It's giving the storm human characteristics. Malevolent means evil. To strike something, which is the other term for struck, to strike something is a hard, fast blow. The storm arrived quickly and aggressively. I've kept just 2 for each of these, so you don't spend too long writing them down. Please pause the video and jot these down as well, and then we can move on. Right, if you need to pause, please pause, take command of the video. I'm going to move on to our PEAT. So you don't need to copy this down, I'm just reminding you. P stands for what's your point. Evidence, quote, technique is the technique, funnily enough, and explain is where you analyse your quote. We're going to create a quick PEAT here. Now, which we use? So the storm is presented as aggressive. Nice simple point. Our evidence. Described as ripping So I've got my quotations. Notice how I keep them really short. I just select out the words I want to keep it judicious to get to the highest part of the mark scheme. Then I've mentioned the technique, this semantic field. I'm going to return to the keyword that I put as my point. The verb ripping shows it's so aggressive. It is tearing them apart like a wild. And I'm using my ideas from earlier when I did my plan. And then you would continue. You have the plan written out, you can keep adding on to this. So you'd say the word whipped is a medieval form of torture. It shows the storm is sadistic, that it has it in its grip, shows how it's extremely strong and powerful and it can't be escaped, etc. Just spend 7 minutes writing this out and trying to add more detail in from the slides where we just wrote down our plan. I'm going to return to making this a large screen for you. Now, if you have time, and I'm aware that I'm not very good at tracking time in these lessons, you have, as usual, a model answer here. If you have time, you can copy out this model answer and identify the PEAT aspects. If you don't have time, it will always stay on system on Google Classroom for you to return to in dear time, or if you'd like to do some revision over the weekend. This is what I want you to be focusing on, these lessons for revision. They're showing you really clearly how to get the highest marks for Language Paper 2. Now that's the lesson completed for today. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a really relaxing weekend. Don't forget you should still be revising, but make sure you find some time just for yourselves too. See you on Monday. Bye.